Aaron Crow, welcome to the show.
Hi, Martin. Thanks so much. Thanks for having me.
So we were getting to know each other a little bit beforehand, but for the sake of the audience, why don't you tell us your superhero origin story?
My superhero origin story.
Yeah.
Uh, let's see. So what's a good way to do that? What's a good example of that? What's a good
Well,
example?
you could either go back to your, grandparents and what they were doing, or you could just like, what is it you do now, and how did you get into that?
Sure. Okay. Well, I think my superhero origin story is that I was profoundly lucky and that I was born at the right time. So I was born roughly 46-ish years ago into a world that really wanted more technical people, more engineers, kind of computer nerds is the way you could think of it. And I just happened to come out of the womb interested in that stuff. I think from the first moment I can remember, I was drawn to that stuff. In fact, you couldn't keep me away. People tried to keep me away, but they couldn't do it.
What was
And
your first computer?
it was a Timex Sinclair 1000 that was the same thing I saw my uncle had. And the second I saw it, I think I was in like sixth grade or something, or maybe it was earlier than that. The second I saw it, I effectively took it away from him and just spent, you know, all my time on it. And so he bought me my own. And then it was a Commodore 64 after that.
Oh, that's cool. My dad bought me and my brother an Apple IIe, so that was the first thing we had. But he was
Cool.
in high school, I was in college already at that point, so I'm a little bit older than you. But yeah, so that's cool. That's a fun computer. So you've been doing that since you were young, and then what kind of work did you do starting out?
Yeah. Well, so then when fast forward to college, I found my way into a computer science and engineering degree. No big surprise, at UCLA. And there was this really kind of mysterious, interesting, cutting edge, disruptive thing coming out at that time called the internet. And people were debating a lot about, like, would it work? Would it not work? Would anyone ever do business on it? And if they did, how would that go? And I became fascinated by that. And I thought, there might actually be something there. And so again, being lucky, I graduated into what basically became the dot-com boom. Um, for more like my own personal reasons, not so much for money, just my own personal reasons. I really wanted to work at a company that was trying to do something on this weird thing called the internet. Like, I wanted to work for one of the companies that was trying to prove it could be something. Um, so I graduated in that market and started doing back-end internet, software development type work in order to support. The first company was a company that was doing bespoke websites for corporations, and this was before the term, web shop. This was at a time when like a big part of what that company had to do was convince businesses that they should try having a website.
Now, was
Uh,
this a British company?
no, it wasn't. It was based in Santa Monica, California. Actually, it was started in
So
Santa Monica.
were any of your mentors British? Where was the bespoke? Like one of my mentors in project management, he would talk about bespoke software, and that's a big term in the UK. So I was just curious. Just
Oh, I think that was just a word I threw out randomly.
oh, I like it. I mean, most back then they used to call it like custom software versus bespoke, but I love it.
Custom,
Yeah.
yeah. And then
Play the hunch.
the second company was Geocities, which what fascinated me about that was, they were trying to do this thing where, like, hey, maybe people would like to socialize, online, and maybe they could do that around these weird things called websites, and maybe we can help support that. And so I think, one, like, my superpower there was that I'd spent a lot of time in college and earlier just preparing to be able to crank out code to kind of support features like that. And I was lucky to come at it, like, to be born into a world that was going to do that, and then to come out of college at, like, I don't know, almost exactly the right time.
The kids don't know, but GeoCities was a pretty big, important company back in the day.
Yeah, I still run into people who like do remember that. Like, for some people, that was actually their first introduction to, like, getting themselves online.
Yeah, I was online a little bit before that. Back before Microsoft did their browser, I don't remember what Netscape version it was, but I was on it pretty early. But yeah, it was GeoCities was revolutionary. If I remember correctly, a lot of people started. The rage then was I need my own homepage, and I
Right.
want to go to GeoCities and get my own homepage.
For
And
free.
yes, you don't pay any money. That's very weird. Oh, look, and you would say, this is my home address. And when the internet was first starting out, you would never type in a URL. you would click on the first thing, and then that, and then you go from, like, the web really was a web. You clicked and clicked. Remember when I first saw the internet, I saw a web page, and I just, like, I forgot what I was clicking on. I got from one thing to another thing to another thing, like the linking aspect. This is long before Google, long before the way you find something, you just put it in a search bar. It was more like, and that's what was so brilliant about Yahoo. Like, it was actually a good company back then, right? Because they curated the web back when that was actually possible. And they went and they found, these are the sites worth doing. Oh, are you interested in your own homepage? Well, Geocities can do that for you. And you want sports? Well, these are the 10 sites that give you comprehensive sports. And you want arts, and there's, it was just like, you'd make Yahoo your homepage, and you would just go browse the internet from that, and you could search, but the search was crappy. So it was a very different kind of thing. I feel so old talking about this, but yes. So you were in GeoCities, and then what happened?
Well, so I mean, I guess mainly I just went deeper down the rabbit hole. I developed a taste for working at, smallish internet startups, doing, interesting, ambitious things. I think in a lot of ways I haven't changed. I think I'm pretty predictable that way.
Yeah. So what are you, on the technical side, what are you really good at?
Well, yeah. So when it's hands-on engineering work, it's back end as opposed to front end, much more back end. And I think in some ways now, I'm pretty traditional in my thinking and my modes there. Like to this day, the most code I've ever written by language is probably Java by a long shot, which I know now is that's becoming kind of one of the older. Like I mean, eventually we're going to look at that the way that we look at COBOL now. I know. But that's probably where I've written most of my code. Definitely written most of my code. Probably made most of my money as a software developer, like per hour or whatever, is doing Java work. So that's kind of my foundation. That's my background.
You youngsters and your COBOL.
Right. Yeah.
Yes, I understand. I don't even want to tell you. In college, I learned Pascal. So.
Right.
And PL1, very useful.
When I was graduating from college, Java was the hot new, cutting edge thing. I mean, it was literally version 1.0, I think, on the day I graduated,
Yes. I remember being the hot shot young, programmer, and the stuff that anything I'll mention that I was good at is just ancient now. Right. So it's pretty funny. So you do the back end stuff. So tell us about the company you're working with now, the startup.
Right. So I work at Spydertech, which is a small GovTech startup founded in Manhattan Beach, founded and headquartered in Manhattan Beach. It's currently 9 of us total. And what we do is we help law enforcement agencies communicate better with their community, so maintain better relationships with their citizens.
Well, that's super important. How do you do that?
Yeah. Well, so let me give you kind of like a basic, elevator pitch, if
Please.
you'll. So imagine that you, the citizen, imagine that, heaven forbid, you suffer let's say a car break-in. Someone broke in your car. You notice someone broke in your car overnight. You call the police, right, to report it. You would hope to get something that looks like modern customer service. So maybe a high bar to compare there is what Amazon has done in terms of customer service. If you order something on Amazon, you get all kinds of great things right out of the box. You get, so to speak, you get an immediate confirmation message, right? Email message with links to more information. You're able to go online, be able to track your order. You'll know when it's delivered, like all these great things. Usually with these kinds of services, you also get the avenue for feedback. You can give Amazon the feedback. You can give feedback for the related to the particular purchase you made, to the manufacturer, to the seller, all that kind of stuff, right? So as a citizen who's called, maybe one of your worst days ever that you've had to report this crime, you would hope for that level of service from your law enforcement agency. So you would hope for, let's say, a well-formatted text message that tells you someone's on their way, here's a report number for more information, so on and so forth. If that officer is, let's say, delayed a bit, you would like an update on that. Later, if there's updates on your cases, like if the police have arrested someone related to your case, you would love to get that in a timely, modern fashion, by email or by text. And then later, it would be great if you could give direct feedback to the law enforcement agency on how they did. How did you feel about your call with dispatch? How did, the officer treat you? How did you, do you trust the agency? Right. So what we do is we provide all of that end to end in a modern, automated fashion.
Well, the other piece of it is if, they stole your car, you got to you got to talk to the insurance company. So having some documentation of, yes, I called them right away. Here's the number. Here's who they dispatched. Just helps some of those kinds of things, right?
Yeah, so that's a great point. So you'll have all of that at your fingertips, through text messages as well as your email inbox.
And so I don't know if you've done this yet, but so do you have all the back end pieces of what it is, whatever it is you need to report to your insurance company or whatever? How is that in your plan? Is that what you're doing? What's
Yeah, yeah,
what,
that's a good question. I'm not an expert on how we can tie in the an insurance company per se, but what you're talking about in general is definitely there. Meaning, like if you need a concrete paper trail with like
yeah,
timestamps,
yeah.
um, as well as references directly to the law enforcement agency, like case numbers and things like that, you've got that automatically with this system.
Yeah, well, I mean, the thing that's interesting is like, I don't know, 6 months ago, I got a lift home, actual lift as opposed to Uber, right? And I had gone to a party, and so I got a lift because I had a couple of drinks, and so, um, and we were driving home, and the driver was fine, everything was fine. We're stopped at a light, and somebody rear ends us, right? And I definitely felt it, and there was what have you. It turned out to be no big deal, but the amount of back and forth with the driver trying to figure out how do you do a police report, the insurance company contacting me, the whole deal. If they had your service and your interface, it would be so much simpler for them. There's so many interactions where, you know insurance is the one that I'm thinking of, but also in terms of parole, also in terms of community, what's going on in the community. I could see that's hugely important because I'm guessing just with my interactions that not all police departments have the Amazon level of service when you interact with them.
Well, I mean, what the way we look at that is once we start working with law enforcement agency, we want to get them there like right away, from day one, like basically with us right out of the box. Again, they've got that level of service once our systems are interfaced. I'll tell you one of the things that I think maybe like one of my favorite parts of the features we offer is the survey part of it. This is something where we're able to get direct feedback directly from the citizen to the law enforcement agency, in many cases linked directly to the officers that were involved in responding, and all the case history and all of that. And so I love I get to watch these things go over the wire. Like we get to see these responses come in and go directly to law enforcement agency, and that, as you can imagine, it's a mixed bag. You get the constructive criticism, but I also see like a lot of great positive feedback, and it's really cool to see all of that going directly to the agency, to the command staff there, so they can actually do things about it. They can actually respond. And I think we're having a real impact. We're currently live with 25 agencies. That's multiple states in the US. That's also an agency up north in Canada. To date, we've processed roughly 40,000 of these survey responses that have gone directly from citizens to the law enforcement agencies.
Yeah, I mean, definitely in LA, one of the issues is just the relationship between the community and the police. And your mileage may vary depending on who you are, what community you live in, and what have you. How are the communities, the community, whatever organizations, the civic organizations, how are they responding to this? And do you have to do anything special to communicate with them?
Right. Well, the communication is what you would like as the citizen, when you receive, like, say, a survey invite from us. It's what you would expect. It's professional, friendly language, clear instructions, easy to take the survey, all of that. And then some of these surveys, well, we customize them based on what the agency wants. Some of these surveys do literally ask, "What do you think of this process? What do you think of this survey? What do you think of how did you feel about the electronic communication you received?" Um, I'm not just saying this because I work at Spydertech, but the fact of the matter is that feedback is overwhelmingly positive, right? Citizens feel overwhelmingly positive about, like, yeah, it is great to get a high standard of electronic communication, and I am happy that I can fill out the survey, get get feedback directly to the agency.
I mean, playing devil's advocate, a police agency that's well run and has a good relationship with the community would be more likely to engage your services than an organization that doesn't want to hear bad feedback, right?
Yeah,
So
that's fair to
that
say.
wouldn't necessarily be surprising, but I would think even in places where they've got bad news, like there's many times, using the Amazon as an example, the Amazon package, there's been many times the package has been left in the wrong place, or there, you know, if I get something that's worth, you know, more than $10. I get some, if I have a thing that's $50 and they don't leave it right on my door, but they kind of throw it in the yard where, you know, someone could take it and knows that there's a package.
Right.
So now they've started making a picture, and then I got a package today, and they actually said, "Were you happy with it? And what, you know, what feedback can you get the delivery service?" And as it happened, like usually my door swings open a particular way, and the person today made sure to put it out of the path of the door, so it was particularly easy for me to pull it off, and I appreciated that versus somebody else. So just having some place to give that feedback, even when I'm not happy, but at least I'm happy that I can say, you know, what, take a look at this picture. What the hell were they doing? Um,
Right.
it gives you something to vent your frustration. So if you have a community that's got difficulty, and you know, yes, Officer Sam was 25 minutes late, and you have some accountability, it's not going to fix your problem, but it gives you the tools that allow you to fix them if that's what you're committed to, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the accountability is key there. And like, I think it's really exciting to see that.
Yeah. So what has changed since the quarantine? Are you guys busier? Or you have to add new features?
Great question. The answer is yes to both of those. We are busier, and I can dive into why. And we are enhancing features, and I can dive into why on that as well. One of the big deals here in law enforcement is the agencies now have to change some of their operational plans, or you know, some of their approaches. One of the big things there is, as you can imagine, they want to minimize direct person-to-person exposure, so that, you know, for example, from their officers to other people, like they want to be really careful about that. So they're starting to change the thresholds of like, well, you know, what 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 are the kind of calls that we really absolutely do have to continue responding to in person to, versus calls where maybe we shouldn't be now. So I think the types of calls that you'll see them changing now will be like, for example, if you report that your car was broken into, or even your car was stolen. Now agencies are thinking very carefully about that, and they're much more likely now to say, well, okay, we'll have an officer call you back and determine whether you need an immediate, you know, in-person assist, or whether this is something we can deal with remotely, for example.
Right.
So you're seeing those thresholds change, which then one of the reasons that we're more busy now is that our current customers want to change their messaging there, so that, you know, when you, the citizen, immediately receive notification from them based on your call, you have a very clear explanation of these special, you know, changes.
Circumstances. Yeah.
Exactly. Also, it seems to me, from where I'm sitting, it looks like new customers, and especially customers that were already in our pipeline, they're now in more of a hurry to get online with us. For the similar reason, they want to have this flexibility, this ability of the, you know, first of all, the direct, modern, you know, electronic communication that's, you know, fast, as well as the flexibility there to update that communication based on the changing emergency, the changing requirements of the emergency.
Now, with your software, is there a way to make a police report online, or, you know, call someone online rather than just do 911?
We don't currently provide that, and you know, that's usually more on the law, on how the law enforcement agency, the particular agency, has set up their technology. Like, for example, and we also don't handle, for example, like we don't do anything that handles directly, like say a 911 call. Right? That's not really our wheelhouse.
Sure.
But what we do is on the other end of it, we give the citizens fast online access to the concrete details of those reports.
Right. Well, I'm just thinking if for certain things people might prefer self-service. So like if someone's broken into my house, you know, I'm going to call 911. But if someone stole my car, yeah, I'd like to talk to a police officer, but I might just want to, like, while it's fresh in my mind, let me just give you, I've got online, here's my license number, here's my thing, here's where it was, maybe attach a picture of where it was parked and all that kind of the stuff. So it's easy enough. But I could see where law enforcement would be careful and how they allow people to report and what have you. But I'm just curious.
And, you know, to this day, I mean, it's still standard that if an officer does show up and a report needs to be taken, you know, it's, you know, pen and pad, that kind of thing. One thing I'll mention there, though, that I think is really interesting is the drone programs that law enforcement agencies were already working on. The police were already working on ways to make use of drones. For example, tracking a suspect who's on the run. Well, those programs are now getting fast tracked. So you're seeing these agencies get those online in a hurry. For example, imagine that you're the police agency and you get a call of, like, let's say like a low level disturbance, like, a
Yep.
vehicle is causing problems, on such and such an intersection. What you might want to do is just shoot a drone over there to take a quick look and then make the determination of whether officer presence is required, for
Right.
example.
The civil libertarian in me is not so excited about those changes, but from a
Yeah,
technological perspective, I could definitely see, definitely it's a safety kind of a thing, but
right.
yeah, but that's
And
neither here nor there from a technical perspective, right?
well, yeah, and definitely there's multiple angles to that. Absolutely, right? Like, and I think it can get complicated too. I think there's difficult decisions to make with that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So now, were the 9 of you in a location in Manhattan Beach, or do you mostly work from home anyway?
Well, so before the pandemic, we were going to a small office in Manhattan Beach, roughly 3 days out of the week. The other 2 days, Tuesdays and Thursdays, were traditionally work from home days. So on most Tuesdays and Thursdays, the whole company was actually working remotely from home. So there's some good news there. We already had a foundation. Like, one way to look at that is we went from 2 out of 5 to 5 out of 5.
Right. So you're using a lot more Zoom meetings or things. Do you use Zoom?
Exactly. Yeah, a lot of Zoom, and then a lot of Slack calls, and then of course all the other normal stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. You're finding it much. You think you're going to go back to 3 days a week when this is all over, or has everyone gotten so used to working the way they're working? What do you think?
That's a great question. I don't know the answer to that question. If I had to guess, that when we do go back to something that looks like normal, my guess is we'll still want to be able to be in person relatively frequently. That's my guess. And I think especially when it's a small, fast-moving team, I think there's a lot of argument of why you'd want to be able to do that on at least a semi-regular basis.
So what are the
But
situations you miss? You miss being together. What do you see? Like, are there features that? Oh man, I wish I understood you meant that.
right. Yeah. I mean, exactly. That's a great example. Also, I think, a lot of times there's kind of synchronicity that will happen in an in-person environment. Like, people overhear something or someone, and that'll lead to an interesting conversation. I think there's a lot of situations where they'll just be more timely, more fluid, more natural if you're all kind of together. I think also then there's just like fuzzy human things where a team can often bond and be cohesive together better in person. Difficult conversations are usually better in person. I think, in my experience. So things like that.
Yeah. So what else personally has it been like for you being under quarantine?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and it brings, I think it brings us to one of my key fascinations here on the like sociology side. So me personally, I'm somewhat of an introvert. Like, I'd say I'm a mild to moderate introvert naturally. So this is fine for me. I'm fine. My wife is much more of an introvert. Like, I'd call her almost an extreme introvert. So this is great for her as far as that goes.
Yeah, she just wishes you'd get out of the house and get out of the way, right?
It's funny you mentioned that. I have it on my list to go for a long hike right after this to give her that to give her the space. So you're dead on for that. Now, on the other hand, what about the extroverts? Well, so I think this is a big gut check moment for a lot of us to really understand where we fall on that spectrum and what that means for us. So I've talked to friends who thought they were introverts, and they're realizing, like, that's not really the case, because this is kind of stressful and tiring for them to have to work remotely all the time, that kind of thing. I have a dear friend who I would call an extreme extrovert. And I think that's an interesting story. Well before this, like a couple years back, I had a heart to heart with him because my wife and I noticed, so he's a dear, dear friend of ours going years back. Let's call him Harry. We noticed he had a particular issue with women. He would get married to women and then go through messy divorce. And this happened twice. So the second time it happened, this was painful enough on our side, both as friends who love him and also as business partners with him. This was serious enough on our side that I felt a responsibility to try to kind of get to the bottom of it. Like how is this happening? Long story short, he feels lonely if there's not always someone around and things going on and all of that. So I think marriage was kind of a patch for him in a way. And so I think he would do it when maybe he shouldn't have done it.
Or the wrong kind of person.
Yeah, something like that, right?
Yeah.
So that led to badness. And so one of my conclusions there was, well, okay, so he's an extreme extrovert. Like he needs all of this social interaction. He doesn't want to be alone. So I had a heart to heart with him about how to be alone, and I was kind of naive at the time. I challenged him to just learn how to be alone, learn how to be on your own better. And, all these silly things, right? Love yourself, be comfortable in your own skin. You shouldn't need another person to be happy and all of that. It was a little bit naive in hindsight because, I thought he and I had an understanding, and I checked in with him some months later about it. And I asked him if he had been, exercising that, if he had been trying to do that. And he said, yeah. Look, here's what I did. A couple weeks ago, it was Sunday, and I stayed alone in my home for a full 2 hours.
That's amazing.
And I was like, wait a minute, like this is not really what I had meant. Like I had meant something a bit, more.
Well, but what you got to get for him, that was amazing.
For him, it was. For him, that was an achievement. And another thing that I realized I'd been so naive to begin with was he was telling me about a trip he took. He had taken an international trip, and he was bragging about how, that was good for this. And I said, well, but didn't you traveled with friends, right? And he said, yeah, but what about the plane ride over? Doesn't that count?
Yeah.
And I said, well, I know your friends weren't on that plane, but weren't you literally sitting right next to someone? And there was like this long, awkward silence, and I realized like, okay, like I was just so naive with how I talked to, how I talked with him about this stuff. Well, anyways, I tried to be less naive, and I realized like, okay, look, like that's just who he is. That's a personality. He, every weekend he would cram it with all these activities, getting together with friends, getting together with family. And from my view as an introvert, it was like he was just desperately always trying to cram every minute with things. Well, I was wondering how he's doing now,
Well, pick up the Zoom, see it, find out.
Right. So I talked to him recently, and I checked in on this. I was like, so we talked about all of this stuff, and yeah, it's hard for him. The word he used was he's about to go apeshit. Was the exact phrase, So this is rough, and so all of that is to say that yeah, I think it's a big gut check moment for us. Maybe the biggest time in history for introverts versus extroverts to kind of understand the ins and outs and to grapple with this.
I did a deep dive on introversion versus extroversion probably 15 years ago, because my kids, they exhibited qualities of both. And like my younger one, everyone would think she's an extreme extrovert because she's so friendly. She makes, she'll be in a new situation, she'll make 5 friends, no problem. But I'm trying to remember the exact terminology, but in terms of like what she needs, she's an introvert. And so I think that at least the modality that I, when I studied, the question I'll ask you is, if you're with 10 people and you're done, do you feel exhausted or do you feel energized? And the extroverts are the ones that are energized by people, and the introverts are the ones that are exhausted by people. It's not necessarily how they seem and how outgoing they are and what have you. It's, what is the energy? What do you do to recharge? And what you're pointing to is, if you're introverted, no matter how yes or no introverted, if you get energy by being by yourself, so this, this whole period is going to be like, you come out of this and you're like, this was the best thing of my life. I made these changes. I had, so energetic. I've never been so productive. And the extroverts are like, they're dying of thirst. But the things that the extroverts can do, like one of the people that I interviewed is doing a happy hour every week, and you get on a Zoom with 100 other people. It's not the same as the energy internally, but you have lots of conversations with people, and it's the best you can do, and it will make a difference for you. And the other thing is they can do distancing walks with people make a difference. If they get a group, they keep their distance, but they're kind of in the presence of other people. As I would definitely recommend that for people that are extroverts. But yeah, you're pointing to something real. Humans were not designed to be in lockdown the way that we are, and the introverts have a leg up on the extroverts. But even the introverts, there's only so much charging up you're going to do, and at some point you want to go out and do something, right?
Yeah, I guess that's true. Well, so the definition you gave is exactly my working definition of introvert versus extroverts, right? It's sort of energy flow, like which direction is the energy flowing? So that's exactly the definition I was working off of. And going back to my buddy Harry, other words he threw at me were like, he's feeling isolated, he's feeling alone, he feels unfulfilled. So I guess that's a challenge on that side. And then in terms of like challenges for all of us, yeah, I agree with that. Like one thing I'll call out there is I think we're all starting to miss, like we miss. There's a lot of things we're all kind of missing. I think one of the things is exposure to nature. Like for me, I've always appreciated being able to immerse myself in nature. And I think that's just a common human thing. Like I think humans do better when we have an opportunity to immerse ourselves in nature. So one of the big things there for me, my favorite like pastime hobby is surfing. And that is, as far as I'm concerned, that's like a 10 out of 10 on immersing yourself in nature. Like I don't know how to immerse myself more in nature than literally being, underwater, being engulfed in waves,
You're in nature and you're present. Those are the two things, right?
Yeah. So now that's all gone for me
Now,
now.
are you the guy that got the $1,000 fine in Manhattan Beach for?
No, but I feel that guy. I feel him.
Yeah, that's one of the things I just don't get. I mean, I get the social distancing, but I don't think surfing is that's a social distancing kind of thing. It's very solitary. You're not close to anybody else.
Yeah.
Am I missing something about surfing?
Well, you can hang with buddies when you do it, and you can be part of a
Sure.
lineup, or sometimes you'll even rub shoulders, literally with people, that kind of thing. But yeah, but the exposure to nature, and so, I think that can be a struggle too. Like if you're like me and you've lost that in such a sort of abrupt fashion, dramatic fashion, that's rough. But like in my case, I can fall back on trail running and hiking and that kind of stuff, and I sense that everyone's trying to figure out now, how to play that game.
Yeah, I swim 5, 6 times a week, and I haven't swam since this thing started. So I remember the last time I swam, I'm like, is it a good idea for me to be this close to all these other? It's not the swimming that's the problem; it's the locker room, right?
Yeah.
So I didn't go the next day, and a few days later we had the lockdown. But I really miss the swimming. I'll walk every day, but again, since I can't walk on the beach, I'm not really walking in nature. I'm walking, through the same streets all the time, and it's not the same level of exercise as swimming, and it's not the zen thing I love about swimming is like you're immersed in the water. Either I'm listening to a podcast or I'm not listening to anything, and I'm just like listening to my breathing, and I really miss that. That's definitely, and my gut misses that as well.
Yeah, so this is rough, right? I talked to a former coworker just the other day, and she was telling me, the gym, like a regular gym schedule was her thing, and that's similar to surfing. That's just all gone, right? So in her case, she the way she put it was she's enjoying being bad at yoga. So she's taking up yoga and she's learning that, and she's considering what kind of other like exercises can she do, at home. And I think that like all of us, I think this is like now a general struggle that we're going through, we're grappling with.
For sure. So as a successful person, what is it that you do? I think I told you a little bit about my framework around winning the day. What is your formula to success? How do you make sure that you're on track every day and get towards your goals?
Right. That's a great question. And I think what I'll do is maybe I'll present kind of like a mixed bag there, and maybe what I'll do is I'll start with something sort of vague, fuzzy, and idealistic, and I'll try to end up with something a bit more concrete, and then
Sure.
go from there.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'll start with one of my all-time favorite definitions of what is a leader. Like if you're at work and you're a leader, what does that mean? Or if you see someone at work and you feel like they're a leader, what does that actually mean? One of my favorite definitions of that is you're at work and you look to the left of you, you look to the right of you, you see the people around you, and you wonder, what can you do to help them? And if you think of something you can do to help them, you do it. Even if that sometimes means that it, it's hard, or it takes some courage or some risk, or, it's awkward or whatever. So that by itself is one of my most favorite definitions of what a leader is. And as I worked my way through my career and kind of went from someone who was like super focused on just my own thing and everything about me, and as that evolved into actually caring about like the people around me, and like, hey, like maybe I should also care about the team and the company and all that. As I evolved that way, that definition of what a leader is naturally resonated with me. And so now, so then it went from being unconscious to actually being conscious, where I can put it into words. And now I can consciously be thinking to myself every single day at work. I can be thinking to myself like, okay, who's to the left of me, so to speak, who's to the right of me? What are they doing? What are their challenges? Is there anything I can do right now that might help them? Even if it's hard, even if it's awkward, difficult, whatever, is there something? And if there is, like, then, I prioritize it. I try to figure it out. I try to do it, to the best of my ability. Not saying that I'm always successful or that I'm great at it, but it's a mode of operation, right? It's a way of thinking that I think is important. So that's kind of a big, fuzzy, idealistic thing. But I do view that as kind of a guiding light, because that can help answer a lot of questions, right? It can help you draw the line between like, what do you do? What do you not do? That kind of
What I hear is that that's the framework you're living in. So like the larger goal, the larger thing, but what can I do to push the ball forward, right? You're always looking at that every day.
It's like a guiding light. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So then very much related to that, and maybe becoming a little bit more concrete, is if and when someone comes to me directly with an issue, especially if it seems meaningful to them, one of my top priorities is then, as much presence as I can muster and as much helpfulness as I can muster. I would like to make that situation better, hopefully without making anything else worse. And I think that's a pretty good high standard. Like, there's situations where that's really, really hard to do. And so I think I think it's great for us to challenge ourselves that way. How can I make things better without making anything worse? And if somebody is coming to me directly with an issue, like, how do I make that better without making anything worse? So I guess that's another kind of like standard or bar that is meaningful to me.
That's a pretty difficult thing to do in coding sometimes. Like
That's right.
Breaking something else, right?
And believe me, like, I'm certainly not perfect in that area. And then now I'll become like super concrete and specific. Like, one of my current roles at Spydertech is to help design, implement, and oversee our monitoring and alerting of all the different interfacing we're doing with agencies. So all the live data going back and forth, we want that to be up and running all the time. We expect, basically uptime, responsiveness, comprehensiveness of data, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, you have like an uptime promise.
We do. We have an SLA with agencies. Yeah. And, as well as like internal standards of like, we always want to be getting this data. We always want to be serving the customer, all of that. And there's there's a bazillion things that can go wrong, can and do go wrong. And so a core part of my duties is, one thing is, if and when something goes wrong, like, I should know about it and I should respond to it in a timely and appropriate fashion. If that means escalating, that's one thing. If it means dealing with it directly, that's another thing. So on and so forth. And then another part of that is, hopefully I'm not raising a lot of false alarms, right? So you think about the boy who cried wolf and all that kind of stuff. Like, hopefully I'm avoiding that. But then mainly the thing is, if something does go wrong, I really should know about it if I'm doing my job properly.
Yeah, that's awesome. So what is it that you'd like, you have this audience, what is it you want to tell them?
Well, so I'd like to talk a bit more about Spydertech and some things, I've learned there about law enforcement and community, the community relationships with law enforcement. This has been like a big educational process for me, because I basically had zero law enforcement background when I went to Spydertech. And so I think I was naive about a lot of things. I was undereducated about a lot of things. So one thing I'd like to drill down on there is just the ongoing conversation we're having, like, in our country, that we've been having about law enforcement and how we feel about the police, and and that kind of thing. It's sad to say, but there is recent history of strife, right? We have some ongoing history of individuals and organizations and communities having friction with law enforcement, having complaints about law enforcement. At the extreme end of that, you've got the ACAB. If you're familiar with ACAB, it's kind of
tell our audience what you.
Yeah. So this stands for All Cops Are Bastards.
Okay.
ACE, and it's a way of the citizens saying that, you know, they just are not down with law enforcement. Like they're just not happy with law enforcement at
Right.
all. Um, and, you know, maybe less extreme, you know, you'll see things like protests in individual cases and, you know, things like that. Well, what I'd like to do is I'd like to represent another side of that. So first of all, I just want to make sure I say, I hope it goes without saying, but of course, by definition, I do not support bad cops, right? Just like I do not support bad doctors or bad lawyers or bad teachers, right? Bad clergy. Like, so I don't support bad cops. I'm not here to try to defend illegal activities or, you know, true police brutality or, you know, that kind of thing. So I'm not here to defend that. There is another side to this, which is I think a lot of times there's misunderstanding. There's misunderstanding of how and why the police operate the way they operate. I think there's sometimes a bit of, as citizens, it's easy for us to underappreciate the difficulty that the police face and the challenges that the police face. So I'll give you some concrete examples of what I'm talking about. Our CEO and founder, Rahul at Spydertech, has a law enforcement background. He was once a full-time law enforcement officer, and he's currently a reserve officer at Redondo PD. And one of the things he does for the company that is really cool is he will on a periodic basis, he'll show us body cam footage. So, you know, the body cam footage is what the police can record on their, you know, they have, you know, video cameras now on their uniforms. And a lot of times these become public, they become public domain so we can view them. And so Rahul will show these things and, you know, and then explain the story, like, you know, the background and, you know, the, you know, inside baseball kind of stuff. And a lot of times there's a component there of like, well, how did the community react to this situation, you know, before, during, and after. So this has been fascinating to me. Like this has been a really great part of my education at Spydertech. And one specific example I'll share with you was, I think this was an event locally. I think this happened in Hawthorne, but I could be wrong about that. But anyways, the police were called in to help with it was basically like an armed robbery that happened at, I think, a 7-Eleven or another convenience store. Long story short, police arrive on scene and they half surround let's call him a suspect. They half surround a suspect. They've got him down. They've asked him to get down on his knees. There's been no physical contact, but the officers have weapons drawn. They're yelling at the suspect, you know, orders to, you know, put his, you know, all the stuff that law officers do. It's a fair number of cops. You know, we're probably talking about high single digits or maybe even double digits of, you know, got this person halfway surrounded. Already at this point,
you're talking like 9 to 12 cops.
Something like that. Yeah. You know, multiple vehicles have pulled up and all of that.
Yep.
Now this includes one police officer holding a very large black rifle. So she's got this massive gun, very intimidating looking, large barrel.
Shotgun.
With all the, I'm sorry?
A shotgun, probably.
Looks like a shotgun.
Yep.
So along with all the other officers who, you know, drawn, half surrounding this suspect who's, you know, got his hands up, is this officer with a massive looking rifle pointing right at the suspect. So later, you know, this photo and this video footage got out to the community, and, you know, it's probably reasonable. The reaction you and I might have is like, wow, that's an excessive use of force. Like, why, like after they've already got this person half surrounded and they're pointing, you know, loaded guns at them, why did this woman officer then feel the need to bring out this massive shotgun? And you and I might reasonably feel like, you know, that's kind of excessive, right? Well, the inside story there, the fact of the matter there is that was not actually a shotgun. That was one of those pellet guns, one of those guns that's designed to shoot the pellet bags. That is a way to deal with violent criminals without actually needing to kill them, right?
That's non-lethal, right?
Non-lethal, and that's the deliberate design of that particular
gun for that situation, right?
Right. And so it's actually the opposite of what you and I might be afraid of, right? It's the opposite of excessive use of force. It's a deliberate attempt by the police to deal with a really hard, dangerous situation without needing to actually kill or maim somebody. And so that's one specific example, but you know, we see these happen all the time where there's a misunderstanding. The community, the citizens misunderstand how the police are operating and, you know, why they're operating that way.
Yeah. I have friends on all sides, and, you know, that it's just a really difficult problem in terms of You know, I have friends in law enforcement that are frustrated by all sides of it. And one of the big problems is that we're asking too much of a police, and that we're, you know, you look at, for example, like you might be frustrated that you can't surf. I'm frustrated that I can't go to the beach. And you might look at it across the country. You have different governors enforcing different laws. And there may be, you know, there are many times that like my friends in law enforcement are like, this is a stupid law. I wish I didn't have to enforce it, but I do. And sometimes the community is really upset at a situation that, you know, the legislature or the, you know, other parts of government are putting the cops in an impossible situation. And you've got, you know, the other situation where you do have bad cops, and it winds up getting tribal, right? So which side are you on? And you don't, you know, so I mean, I don't know that that I know anything that's going to solve the problem, but I do definitely have compassion. I wouldn't, I can't imagine how hard it is to be a cop and how hard it is to be misunderstood. And I certainly have compassion for, you know, police officers trying to do their best, trying to keep the community safe, and are asked to do a very, very difficult job. And, you know, like you said, I don't want to excuse any of the bad actors that are making it that much worse for everybody. So
Yeah, I mean, you know, the idea of it being a hard, sometimes impossible job, you know, I think that, yeah, like, I guess, I guess one thing you know, I'd love people to take away from this talk is like, you, that's often true. And you can, and if you're willing to, you know, be open-minded and look at the, you know, the full situation, I mean, you'll see so many examples of that. So, you know, another couple of areas there, like, well, like if you or I were pulled over, let's say for speeding, right? For like just a simple traffic violation, we'd expect the officer to be, you know, cool, calm, and collected. We'd expect the officer to treat us civilly, you know, heck, maybe even be friendly. I don't know, right? We definitely wouldn't, you know, appreciate being drawn on, right? We wouldn't appreciate a gun in our face. From the police officer's perspective, traffic stops are one of the high fatality rates for officers, and the reason for that is they walk up and ask for driver's license and proof of insurance, and the next thing they know,
they've been shot. Yeah.
yeah.
Yep.
And, you know, you can see body cam footage of this where it happened really fast. You know, the criminal would, you know, really quickly. So the opposite. So with every traffic stop, you know, so like a way to have empathy here is to understand every single traffic stop, a good trained officer is going to be prepared for that situation, you know, and just like us, they want to be able to go home at the end of the shift, go home to their family alive, you know. So
One of my friends in law enforcement says that if he's off duty and he gets stopped for speeding or what have you, he'll put his hands on the wheel,
right.
not to make them nervous. Well, can't you just tell them, you know, yeah, you know, the amount of stress I'm going to cause them by, you know, pulling out my badge or anything else is going to be so stressful. He goes, no, you know, I'm a peace officer. I am armed, you know, but he'll be putting his thing. Okay, great. So like it kind of puts them at ease and puts them on, like they don't freak out if they find his gun or what have you, you know, and it's,
Right.
yeah, so it's definitely a very high stress situation that people know nothing about. They're like, why is he so freaked out when I'm speeding? You know, I wasn't really even going that fast. But it's hard to put yourself in somebody else's shoes, isn't it?
Oh yeah, and that's actually one thing I really appreciate about Spydertech is like I said, like that's just been a whole education for me, and I really appreciated being able to see like just the, you know, the complex reality of all of that. You know, I'll give you one third area as an example, if you know, if you'll bear with me. So here's what I think actually might be a great example of pretty much an impossible situation. You know, sometimes we'll hear on the news about how an officer shot someone in the back and killed them. Right. Like, you know, there's kind of like these salacious news stories of like, you know, oh, yet again, police brutality, you know, the officer shot an individual in the back. Isn't that terrible? Well, imagine a situation where you've got an armed violent suspect who's demonstrated, you know, an ability to endanger someone. Let's say they've endangered me. I'm an innocent civilian. Somebody else in an armed fashion has endangered me. The police were called. The police show up. Now this person starts running away, right? They don't respond to the lawful commands of the police officers. Maybe they're still armed, maybe they're not. It's hard to say. You know, people wear lots of clothing, have lots of pockets. Now this person is running away. What are the police supposed to do? I think I mean, it starts to feel like an impossible situation. Let's say they let this person go, and minutes later, this person, heaven forbid, attacks you and you're hurt.
Right.
Well, that looks like negligence on the police officer's part, right? I mean, they knew this person was armed and violent. They had a chance to take them down, but they didn't. But on the other hand, they choose to take them down. Well, that might literally be shooting the person in the back. And now that's going to be all over the news. Is like, well, you know, yet another group of bad cops shot someone, you know, shot a poor victim in the back.
Right.
I think that's really hard.
Well, again, there's what you're talking about philosophically. What is the community asking you to do? And if we're just really clear, as a community, we could either be okay with, okay, we're not going to shoot somebody in the back, and if they wind up hurting somebody else, that's the cost of adhering to our principles. And then if we're like, no, we're not willing to take that risk, okay, that means we can shoot them in the back. It's not
Right.
It's not right for us to put the police in the situation. It's for us to work out those rules and be clear, you know, this is what you're supposed to do, police. But, you know, the thing about our age is we want to have it both ways, and we want to be able to second guess. And it's the same thing, you know, like that's when I'm unhappy with my government one way or another, but meanwhile they have to make a call, you know, and this is locking everybody down is not an easy call to make. And so I have a lot of compassion for the people making the call. But, you know, I understand you want to second guess. You're like, that was a bad outcome, but you can't decide the outcome. You've got to decide the process and live with imperfect outcomes. It's really tough.
I love the way you put it. I love the phrase second guess. Like, it's so easy to second guess. It's so easy to be what do they call it? You know, the Monday morning quarterback,
Yeah.
armchair general. Yeah. That kind of thing. It's so easy to do that. Yeah.
Yeah. So you're getting a firsthand look for that, right?
Yes. And I've been naturally developing. I always had a, you know, generally positive view of law enforcement. That, you know, that's been deepening a lot more for me at Spydertech. And I feel like I'm getting this ongoing, just fantastic education and all the ups and downs there, the complexities, the difficulties. And I've really come to appreciate that.
Yeah. So anything else in terms of dealing with our situation? Anything you see? Because listening to your story, I think, can you imagine being a cop? You know, you signed up for dangerous work, but, you know, now going out in the community, you can catch a dangerous disease just by, you know, having somebody breathe on you.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so, you know, I'll share a little bit about that, about what's happening with law enforcement is, I know, so two things that are almost, they're like kind of go together in an interesting way. One thing is, you're now seeing a bit more show of force in certain ways from law enforcement. Like I think, for example, if you see the Coast Guard or the local police get notably upset about a single surfer in the water, for example, you might think, well, why? Well, they feel an obligation to show presence and to have a show of force around the new regulations and all of that, because, you know, of course, we don't want like a downward spiral into chaos or anything. So they want to be out there and in public view. And you're seeing a lot of agencies deliberately do that more than before the emergency. They're doing it consciously and deliberately. They want that show of force. On the other hand, it's currently the case that if they're in pursuit of someone, or they're dealing with someone who maybe has already committed a crime, and they have a rough idea that has happened, and normally they would be arresting the person. If that person starts sneezing and saying, "Oh, I have COVID," well, that's kind of a game changer. And right now, you'll see you'll see law enforcement officers under orders. You'll see them back off of that situation. Maybe even let this suspect / perpetrator, maybe even let them go in that situation. Now I'm guessing that's not a permanent thing, of course. You know, I'm guessing we're going to see an evolution of that. But you see how these are kind of like bookends, right? Like, on one hand, you've got more of a show of force, a deliberate show of force. But then on the other hand, you've got a deliberate backing down, which I think is like a really interesting kind of balancing act that's going on.
Yeah, it's a super difficult situation. Any closing thoughts you have?
I don't know, Martin. I just want to say, like, I really appreciated, you taking the time to do this. It's been really fun talking to you. As I told you earlier, any friend of Joe's, and especially a brother of Joe's, is a friend of mine. Joe's been really great to me. He's one of the best people I've ever known in the local tech community. He's helped me in ways I've totally lost track of. So many different ways I've totally lost track of them now. So I was delighted to get to meet you, and I really, really appreciate getting to talk with you, and I really appreciate your time.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your perspective, and love to talk with you again.
Thanks so much, Martin.
All right.